Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where we are currently working on the landing system of this rather insane setup that we have here for Eve. And this is, in theory, ready to be tested. So let's put this out there and we'll see what it looks like. So we're just using this as a little deorbiter. This may actually end up changing significantly, but let's just launch this for right now, and how we're going to get this into Kerbin orbit is going to be interesting. We may have to launch this unfueled and fuel it up in Kerbin orbit. We'll see. For now, we're just going to put this out on the runway. And we are, of course, going to teleport this into Eve orbit to test whether this is a acceptable re-entry system. I think our main problem with the last setup was that, well, we ran out of electric charge, and we're fixing that problem here. So let's put this in orbit around Eve. I don't really care about what orbit, as long as it's a reasonably low orbit, so that it's a fairly realistic re-entry. And let's teleport this, and we're going to position ourselves retrograde. Now, something we may want to do here is put some big SAS on the back here, and we'll see about that. For now, I just want to rotate this over, and we can start up this engine. We've only got 59 meters per second in this. Okay, our thrust to weight is not phenomenal, but we'll see if that's enough to deorbit us from this position. Okay, let's fire this up. It's going to be a pretty long burn, and we don't need to drop our speed all that much. So we can just position ourselves right over here at retrograde. We can also extend these two heat shields. We can't extend the center heat shield until we're done with this burn, right? So that is fine. And I'm just keeping an eye on our overall periapsis here, and I'm also noticing the gimbaling here. Well, for now, let's warp this burn, because this is going to be a fairly long burn. And we are drifting. So that is indeed what we're going to have to address with our gimbal here. So this is a very, very low thrust to weight here. This is not necessarily intended to be the final design. This was just intended to deorbit us. And to be honest, we may want to go with a less efficient engine for this purpose, because it doesn't take much DV to get us deorbited here. Okay, let's continue to warp here a bit. This is at 10x warp speed here. And we're now in atmosphere. Let's just get this oriented on around. I mean, we're not in atmosphere. Our periapsis is in atmosphere. Let's just get this oriented on around. I am surprised that we didn't see our engines start to overheat last episode. We will see if that ends up being a long-term thing or not. Okay, so we're just going to continue to hold here. This engine is about half burnt out at this point, and I do want to continue to accelerate that burn speed a bit. Okay. As before, we're going to be going down into the dark side, so it's going to be a little hard to see until the heating starts to ramp up, but this periapsis is definitely indicative that the heating is going to ramp up. So that is noted. We've got about 15 meters per second left in this. Honestly, we're probably going down too steeply here as it is. This is getting pretty deep into Eve's atmosphere. This would definitely be problematic in KSP1. But in KSP2, overheat seems to be significantly different. So I'm just going to continue to burn here until we burn out this tank, and then we'll ditch it. Yes, approaching partially out of fuel orbital event, and that sounds good. Let's just reorient ourselves back down, and we're just shaving off as much speed as we can at this juncture. We've got about 2 meters per second left in this. 1 meter per second left. And what does this put our periapsis at? 54 currently. Okay, so we're going to ditch that. Off it goes. Fantastic. And that apparently broke our heat shield. The detachment did. What? Why would that have broken our center heat shield? That's insane. That is definitely not how that was intended to go. But I guess we'll just warp in and see what happens. I expect to lose the... Wait, no, that didn't break the heat shield. Hang on, no, I'm thinking about this wrong. What ended up happening here is we had an extra decoupler. This needs to get decoupled. Wait, no, hang on. This is the engine, isn't it? That did break the heat shield. Yeah, the heat shield should be on this side of the batteries. So that is problematic for sure. Let's just get this brought into the atmosphere and see what happens. I expect this to go catastrophically wrong. Detaching that engine had no reason to break that heat shield, to be clear. Absolutely no reason whatsoever. That should not have happened. Period. End of story. Yeah, as expected, we're seeing some overheats in that battery. This is not a concern because we're going to have a heat shield here. The real question is, how do our engines do? So at this point, I guess what we should do is we should decouple this. And just ditch it like that. Okay, but I don't know that this is even a valid test at this point, to be honest. Because at this point, we should have extra drag here. A lot of extra drag. But I guess we can see how we do holding attitude, which I expect to do absolutely fine on because we have so much electric charge available. I expect to do very, very well on holding attitude. The question now is, do we have overheats on the engines? We are still accelerating at this point, and that's not super surprising. So overheats on this engine, we don't care about. We will have a heat shield. It specifically overheats in these areas out over here. That's the concern here. So we'll see if that ends up happening here. I'm not going to abort this flight even with that issue. We will double check at the VAB if for some reason it's on the wrong side of the decoupler, but it sure looked to me like decoupling that destroyed the heat shield somehow. I wonder if that's a fluke or if that's something that repeats. We'll have to check into that. But for now, we're just going to continue to drop into this atmosphere, and we're currently at about 81 kilometers. This is already reasonably deep in the atmosphere, but it's not deep enough to glow yet. So let's warp forward a bit. Okay, now we're starting to see some glow as we dip a bit lower, and we can actually see what's going on a bit here. So we're using our engines as heat shields right now, and as long as that holds out, it's fine. But we should have an additional heat shield in the center. That is something to keep in mind here. I don't know if that's a fluke or a design flaw. We will figure it out. So there is a lot of heating occurring. We might want to consider some sort of a re-entry burn. But honestly, I would prefer not to do a re-entry burn. That is fuel that we will have to carry here. And that's a lot of fuel, theoretically. We're already carrying a lot of fuel. This is already incredibly heavy. And getting this taken off from Kerbal is going to be interesting. I think I have a reasonable plan for it. I use the term reasonable. I think I have an unreasonable plan for it, but we'll see. It's going to be like a tri-stack. It's going to be kind of insane. And even then, we're probably going to have to figure out how that engine mount system works, because I don't think Mammoth 2s are going to be strong enough to lift this, to be perfectly honest with you. I highly doubt that's going to be a thing. I am surprised that we're not seeing any heat gauges yet. That said, our orbital velocity is still increasing at this time. Drag is definitely happening. But it seems like the atmosphere of Eve in KSP2 is a lot thinner on the upper side than in KSP1. So that is definitely something that is good to note. But in future attempts, assuming we fix that center heat shield issue, we are going to have considerably more drag than this. Also, our center engine here won't be getting hit with heat. The real question is, what's our terminal velocity of this if we don't have overheat issues? Wow, the heat shields are overheating. Well, that's a good sign. Oh boy, the heat shield's overheating is a fantastic sign. Not in the slightest. Not even a little bit. We could maybe consider putting radiators on the inside here. I wonder if that would manage to reduce the heat levels. Maybe. Note how our orbital velocity is still going up. I want to go into surface mode here. Yeah, our surface velocity is still increasing, as is the amount of air here. So we're not at peak aerodynamic heating. These are going to burn off. They did manage to remove some amount of heat and protect us some, but it's clear that we need more. I'm just wondering, yeah, there they go. So now we're going to have these heat shields ablate off. Or not heat shields, batteries ablate off. Now the decoupler has ablated off, and now we've just got these engines here. So the fairing is still there, awkwardly enough. I'm wondering how deep we have to get into the atmosphere before these engines start burning off. They will start burning off, right? It's remarkable to me that the heat shield actually burnt off. And, of course, we're going to lose attitude because we lost our batteries, so our electric charge is going to go away. Also, our speed is still increasing at this time. So I think it's clear to say that this is going to be an issue, but this is definitely an interesting sign that we're not having other heat issues. This is very interesting. I'm going to, for the sake of testing here, I'm going to turn on infinite electricity because I don't want to lose attitude here. I just want to see how far we end up getting before we start having heat issues. Okay, here's a heat issue on our hydrogen engine. That has been exposed this entire time. That heat shield did not exist. So in reality, we would be going slower due to the extra drag from that heat shield. We're not seeing heating issues on the vectors as of yet, which is pretty remarkable to me. However, our surface velocity is actually still increasing at this moment, which is quite remarkable. It definitely seems like the exponential curve of the atmospheric density is extremely different in KSP2. Okay, we're now seeing a heating effect, or rather a heat gauge. I believe this is on the wing. If we were to lose this wing, that would be a significant issue. That said, if we still had our heat shields, our drag coefficient would be significantly higher, and we would possibly be reducing our speed at this point. Possibly. But our speed is still very, very high. So I think it's pretty clear that this is going to need some tweaks. The question I have now is, how significant of tweaks? These heat gauges are filling but slowly. Now, we are going to lose the hydrogen engine on this attempt fairly soon here, and I think that's fine. Like I said, we will have a heat shield there. The interesting thing here is that we only see a heat gauge on this side. I think this is due to our tilt that we've picked up. In fact, it's gone now. And we would have a heat shield here protecting the hydrogen engine. So I'm not too concerned about the hydrogen engine, but once this goes, these tanks are going to go very quickly. Surface velocity at 60 kilometers is still increasing, and we're starting to see heat gauges on the Mammoth 2s now, but not on the Vectors. So I think it's pretty clear that the Vectors can be somewhat ignored. We're picking up a bit of a... In fact, we're picking up quite a lot of a roll. There goes that hydrogen engine. I'm working on trying to counteract this roll. And yeah, this tank is going to go away, and once this tank goes away, we've got significant problems. This is going to be like a catastrophic failure of the craft at this point. So that is fine. Let's revert back to the VAB, and that was a very interesting test. No doubt about it. So, question number 1. Why did we lose our center heat shield? Question number 2. Can we do some sort of heat dissipation around our heat shields? Those are the questions I want to answer here. So, do radiators not exist in KSP2? Radiators don't exist in KSP2. Okay, so we can't do some sort of heat dissipation there. That's noted. The next question, of course, is why did decoupling this destroy this heat shield? It definitely shouldn't have. Let's put this out again and run a test here. And we'll see if it's a fluke. Because that center heat shield should not have been destroyed. So we'll just put this out in orbit of Eve. There we go. And we're just going to stage this. So I'm just going to stage it right here. Huh. So it destroyed it consistently. This is definitely a bug. But let's revert that back to the VAB and see if we can do something about that. So, mission number 1 here is definitely keep that heat shield alive. That heat shield might slow us down enough to keep the others alive. I don't know that it will. If it doesn't, then we probably need to add more heat shields and spread out the thermal load as much as we can. But lack of radiators is going to make that complicated. So we're going to have to do something about this situation, right? So my question is, why are we having an issue with this decoupler breaking this? Let's get rid of this guy for the time being and put this out on the pad just like this, with the idea being that we're going to see if just the decoupler breaks it. Maybe we can't even have a decoupler on the far side of these heat shields. If that's the case, then that's going to be a significant issue, like a significant design challenge going forward. But this is definitely something we need to figure out. So let's put this out in orbit of Eve. And let's decouple this without anything here. So it didn't destroy it. The decoupler destroyed itself by pushing it in this way. I wonder if we just need to reverse the directionality on that decoupler. That might be the issue. It might just be pushing the wrong way. If that's the case, then that's very strange. That's not how decouplers work, but, you know, whatever. Physics in this game is wacky. So let's hop in here and see if that does fix that issue. Any moment now. There we go. So I'm just going to grab this guy, I'm going to flip it around, and we're going to attach it like that. And let's see if that does the trick. So put this out on the pad again and put it out over Eve. Just to give it as realistic of a test as possible. Go on. Go on. Oh, we're having this bug again. It's refusing to teleport. Okay. Well, I guess we'll run the test here. Yeah, that went the correct direction. Okay. So that's noted. We are refusing to teleport. Let's try heading back to the KSC. Okay. Now let's go to the tracking station. And let's... Well, actually, we should just recover this. There we go. Now I'm going to head back to the VAB, and I'm going to... No, I don't want to revert to the VAB. I want to head back to the VAB. And I'm hoping that I don't have to restart the game to get the teleport to work again. Fingers crossed on that one. Apparently it forgot what vehicle we were working on. That might actually be a good thing here. So let's load up the Eve lander with the deorbiter here. Okay, and we're just going to put this out on the pad, and hopefully it'll teleport. Hopefully. And we'll just bring this on down. Okay. No, the teleport is broken. Let's try putting this over Kerbal. Nope, it is completely broken. Well, I guess the game has to be restarted periodically for this to work. That is very awkward. We're close enough to the end of the episode that I kind of just want to end the episode there and be like, we figured out the problem with this heat shield. Well, what we can do, actually, is something that I was thinking about doing, and that is increasing our amount of drag by doing something. And I will show you what that something is once we load into the VAB. Okay, so here's what that something is as soon as we get properly loaded. There we go. And the idea is this. We're going to take some structural panels here, or rather structural... Come on. There we go. Some structural trusses. And these are going to be like this size, I think. Yeah, about like this. And they are going to stick out like so. From there, we can put in additional expandable heat shields out over here, which apparently does not want to attach to trusses. Okay, that's exciting. It'll attach in this direction, though. Okay, so what we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to expand these out this way-ish. About like that. And then we'll have to change the positioning of them to go down a bit, about right there, out a bit, about right there, and then back a bit. Something along the lines of that. It's down a little too far, so it'd end up being more like that. Okay. Whoa, okay, this is doing this again. Sure, that'll work just fine. So now we're going to need to put in our inflatable heat shields, which would go, in theory, about like that. And then we'd want to strut this. So I would want to put in a strut that would go from here to about here. And then a strut that would go from, well, probably like here to like in here somewhere. Maybe like to the wing or to this fuel tank or something like that. So something like this. So that will increase our thermal load. Why does this have a fairing on it? Honestly, it shouldn't. There we go. Turn off that fairing. So that will give us some additional heat shield here. That'll give us more drag and more protection. So if we extend this heat shield, it's going to look really weird. But if we extend these heat shields like so, and we're going to want to retract them, obviously, before we lift this off. But if we do that, we can see this gives us very close. Actually, this does give us complete coverage. And that'll give us a lot more drag, in theory. So it would be something along the lines of that. Now, obviously, we can't test this without restarting the game. But the good news is it is time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we're going to test this new heat paradigm, and we'll see if that ends up doing the trick. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.